Hey there, welcome to episode 15 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios podcast. Today, let's get it started with Hayden Smith, Esquire, your favorite startup attorney here in Nevada, here in Southern Nevada. And let's get it started. Hayden, welcome.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Good to be on.
So as you may have gathered, listener, that we're going to talk about getting it started. What is it? It is, of course, small business. We're talking about economy in our entrepreneurial ecosystem. Being an entrepreneur in Southern Nevada is a combination of easy and hard. Which part? Well, first, before we get into that, who is this Hayden Smith character anyway?
Yeah, so I myself am a transplant from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I've been here for about 4 years. I work at Marquis Aurbach, which is a local large law firm in town. We just had our 50th anniversary last year, so we're a full service law firm. I focus on business transactions and corporate work as well as real estate transactions. So kind of do all things corporate here, and I've really enjoyed Vegas. I just kind of learning about the startup scene here in town. It seems, I come from Salt Lake, which has a pretty robust startup scene. They call the Silicon Slopes, and I kind of wonder, well, what do we have going on here in Vegas? So it's been good to learn about the resources and also informational to learn about the lack thereof.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. The Silicon Slopes thing, I've checked it out now and then. I'm on their mailing list, and there is this. I myself did my time in Silicon Valley from 1993 to 2001, and then 2005 to 2013. That break in the middle was probably a bad decision at the time. So the interesting thing, Silicon Valley was, of course, Silicon Valley. So then there was Silicon Gulch and Silicon Alley in New York, and Silicon this and Silicon that, and Slopes. Las Vegas will be the next Silicon Valley. And I'm like, there's a reason it's Silicon Valley. It started with chip. That was basically Shockley and Fairchild and eventually Intel. And it was thanks to Stanford and the professor whose name escapes me at this moment, doing radar research and development during World War II, and then being so there's a lot of history there. So the Silicon name, it's my little thing, so I'm sorry to get off on that little rant. But yeah, we should be more creative than that. Anyway, so where did you go to law school, if I'm just curious?
Yeah, I went to Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah.
Cool.
It was awesome. And they're actually one of the top programs in corporate and transactional law. They've got a lot more. They're more creative, I think, approach in that they look at law degree as a leadership degree and critical thinking degree, and kind of call it what it is instead of just is. I always say is you have to take the LSAT to go to law school, and it has no real correlation, and then you go to law school and it has no correlation to the bar, and then you pass the bar and it has no correlation to practicing law, especially on the corporate side.
Yeah, I have had this discussion with new attorneys. I won't call anybody out, but I just was talking about one before we started recording. Literally, this is not a dig, but it's the disconnect. I said NDA one time, and I'm like, what's that? Like, you're an attorney, you should know what that is. But from a practice, it's kind of a learn as you go, because they don't because there's a lot of stuff to learn. So I guess if you dig into, if you get to the point where you're doing NDAs, you're going to know what that is. Non-disclosure agreement, by the way, in case anybody. So that is interesting. And to be honest, it's the same with engineering, in some cases, especially the internet and computing, because by the time you get a degree in anything having to do with the internet is way far ahead of you. So
yeah, that's true.
It's the nature of the beast.
And
you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and I mean, the law is just so broad that,
sure.
I mean, you really can't teach, and laws obviously change. So you learn how to get really good at finding information efficiently and conveying that in a clear way and communicating that so that clients can understand, and discovering kind of what you like and what areas of practice. So I did 2 years of litigation before I really did a foray into corporate counsel work and startup work. And I just really, as I say, I like helping clients avoid litigation and help them foresee potential pitfalls before they get into it, because it's 10 times more expensive to pay a lawyer to get you out of the hole once you're already in there than it is to just
Oh,
avoid it in the first place.
yeah, absolutely. There, some things we'll talk about soon. The basic question is: did you know ahead of time, or did you do you have your, as you said previously, your I's dotted, your T's crossed, and or do you have the right forms? Do you have the right structure? In fact, we'll get into all that. But yeah, there's a lot of things, challenges, but ultimately being an entrepreneur. Have you ever been entrepreneurial? Have you ever been like you had your own business of any kind?
Um, the closest thing is I got my real estate license here actually after I passed the bar, because kind of is streamlined for attorneys. And that was nice to I mostly just refer to agents at my brokerage that do the dirty work. And that way I can split the commission. That's the one thing. There's lots of rules, everyone's very protectionistic. But as a lawyer and a real estate agent, I can do both, and it's kosher. It's so I've done that a little bit, but no, I mean I've have ideas, but I really admire entrepreneurs and just putting yourself out there. And yeah, I think it's almost made me. I think I'm more risk averse than ever now as a lawyer. So it's like,
Yeah,
you have to have a certain element of brashness, I think, to go put yourself out there, and it's almost been ruined for me.
we call it ignorance. It's a
Well,
protector, a protective layer of bliss surrounding our
yeah,
aspirations.
exactly.
Well,
No,
that
but yeah,
go
no,
ahead.
not a whole lot. I worked for a financial technology startup in Salt Lake and saw the growth, saw the excitement, and then it was bought by a Silicon Valley peer-to-peer lender. And so I got to participate in some of the team-wide meetings, and it was really exciting. And then I went to law school right as they were gutting the entire that division and laying off 100 people. So it was a good time for me, and I saw the highs and the lows of a technology company.
Sure. Yeah, I've been there, done that. I've been laid off, and I've been watched the whole place start crumbling, and you get out just in time. So yeah, that was Silicon Valley, and it's sort of funny when you hear people talk. The aspiration is sometimes, especially if you're doing it, like Silicon Valley, or it wasn't all wonderful. Maybe in the early day when I moved there in 1993, there was the energy and buzz, and lots of jobs. People were hiring like crazy, and people were just out of college, and you're getting these great salaries. And every time you changed jobs, you made more money. So I changed jobs every 6 to 9 months, and
Oh
it wasn't
wow,
just
yeah,
but it wasn't just for the money. It was like, oh, this isn't working. This company is kind of flailing around, or it doesn't have a long road ahead of it, or it's out of money. Those things were maybe because entrepreneurialism is harder than. So being an employee, it was interesting. And then I tried my hand at some small startup. It's something people should try if they have any itch. We say the aspirational, nascent, or existing entrepreneurs. If you're one of those, hopefully you're doing it right, or you're trying to. So yeah, I can't even. I never joined a company and then had it collapse immediately, but I've heard horror stories. Like, I got a job offer and they were shut down before I even got there. So
yeah.
those are chaotic times. But I don't know why people want to be like Silicon Valley. They should try to be a better version of wherever they are. Yeah, Silicon Valley is not that great. You be awesome, Silicon Slopes, Utah, or whatever we're going to call Vegas.
Yeah,
Silicon
right. You got to
Oasis
come
or
up
something
with
silly.
something flashy and Vegas like.
Well, Vegas is already flashy. We don't need just be a better Vegas. How about that? Great.
Hey, that's good.
I've been using this term, and I don't know if it's. I doubt I started it, but I just say the Greater Vegas entrepreneurial ecosystem. Because Vegas, if you look on the map, Vegas has, and this becomes important when you're doing things like business licensing or other
Right.
forms and certifications. So that the administrative boundaries of Las Vegas are what they are, but no one on the planet knows what those are except for a few people. And so when you're in Vegas, you could be in Henderson, you could be in any part of unincorporated Clark County. You're still in Vegas. Right? The fabulous Las Vegas sign
Right.
is not in Las Vegas.
Right.
So
It's not in the city. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but it's. I mean, we could just be a better Vegas. I think that'd be fine. But so, say you want to start a company. Let's get to the meat here. Let's get it started, as MC Hammer might say. I don't know if you're anybody a Hammer fan out there. No. Okay. I met him. He's a cool guy. So first, Where would I begin? Hey, Hayden, I want to start a company. What should I do first?
Yeah, and that's really the, going into it without thinking about answering a few questions is dangerous. And those are,
Yes.
who do I want involved? Who, especially if it's a partnership, um, what do I want that to look like? Having a business plan, and that doesn't need to be something formal, or you don't have to go to business school to do that, but the basics of, what are you trying to accomplish? And, if you're a single member uh, company, it's just you doing your thing, it's perhaps a little easier, but I would say really if you have any sort of partners or people that you're looking to collaborate with and have some sort of joint venture, you really need to think about how you're structuring the entity. And so there's, the default is if two people get together, and this is, this is literally in our business textbook, our business law textbooks, is you have now formed a partnership. Even if you don't, it's not something you have to file, it's not something that you have to, fill out formation paperwork for. It's just the act of saying, hey, Bob, do you want to sell lemonade? You've now created a partnership. And that has, in the law, that has a lot of implications. You are now liable for anything and everything your partner does in the name of your partnership. So if it's Bob and Ted's lemonade stand, you and your partner's making representations, you could potentially be on the hook for that. So that's kind of like the think about the origins of entity, for business entity law. It starts with the partnership, and you need to consider carefully what you're doing right off the bat, or you can get down the road. And I always tell clients, people generally end up in disputes and sue each other when you're either one, losing a bunch of money, or two, making a bunch of money. When everything's just kind of flat, usually you don't have issues and you don't think about things, but you need to get ahead of that, because at some point any business owner is going to lose or make money.
Yeah, hopefully according to the plan or the disbursement of like, hey, you're making more money than me. How's that happening?
Yeah. So I would say, that the easiest way to divide the most flexible entity is to set up a limited liability company. And that's generally what I recommend for everyone. And as we're talking here, there's like the actual formation and legal entity side of the law, and then there's the tax side. I'm not a tax attorney. I have a classmate that I refer people to as a tax attorney. So when I'm saying something, that should be construed as, from a tax perspective, because you can be a limited liability company, but you could be taxed as an S corp. And so having a good CPA or tax attorney advise you on that piece, it's really a whole different story. It could be a whole different podcast that I'm not really qualified to speak on.
We'll get there eventually. Not here, but I mean, we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
So this is a great point, because occasionally I and some other people I've had these discussions with about what we're doing, which I'll get to also in a moment. There are people who are aspirational, like, hey, I want to start a business. I want to start that lemonade stand. What do I even have to do? And they don't know things like LLC or, what is an S corp? What's a C corp? What can we do? Should we do an LLP? What is that? I've heard about that. My attorney has one of those, that kind of thing. So the question is, do people read, or do they just kind of dive in? And I've seen this happen in the downtown project days. There was a lot of aspiration got converted into action, because a lot of entrepreneurial people came to Vegas and doing this downtown project thing. It was very exciting, except that they didn't really know what they were getting into from what I saw firsthand. Not speaking about everybody, but every once in a while, there'd be somebody that didn't know exactly what to do next. And it was sort of you don't know how to swim already? Uh-oh, that's not going to be fun for you. So there's a whole Silverflume portal with the Secretary of State. You can file various pieces of paperwork if it doesn't crash, or have a 404 error, or various other problems.
Yeah.
Some things work, some things don't. Don't ever call them for help. That's a nightmare. the voice of experience. But
I
essentially,
can
that's
second all of that. Yes,
yeah.
and I
So
don't know
it's
how much money they spent, but I think it's a record amount for the state on a product that has never provided what it even close to what was promised.
yeah. I was we formed a nonprofit corporation in Nevada, and we are going to file our 501c3 paperwork, a 1023EZ, which has its own implications. The process of doing the just signing up as the registered agent to do the incorporating and all that failed, and I contacted support and they didn't get back to me ever via email. So I called them. I called them at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I was like the third in the queue or something. So I got right through. I said, "Hey," he's like, "Oh, what's your email address?" Okay, and she goes, "Okay, I approved it." I said I never got the confirmation. Anyway, so sometimes things work, but the system itself does not. Yeah, it's very frustrating. But that is a necessary. The things you said are absolutely correct. You have to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Those are good things, and who you're doing it with. It's like dating, I think.
No, it's true. It's we call business divorce cases because it's often so emotional and people don't realize people are never more emotional than when it relates to money. So it really is. You can think of so if you have a limited liability company or LLC, you need to have an operating agreement. A lot of people don't do that when they're first starting out, but it's like a prenuptial agreement. It lays out exactly what happens, what the rules of engagement are, and what happens if you decide to close up shop or one person wants to get out, how you're going to handle all that. So it's like your roadmap. And the nice thing as compared to a relationship is you actually get to reset, what you can't control what people do, but you can control how you are able to respond and what your recourse is going forward. So the operating agreement can be as simple or as complex as you want it to. And but it's just important to at least have something written down that both partners or all partners are in agreement on and sign.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say it's nice when it's written down ahead of time because then you don't have to argue about it. It's already, you just say, remember this? I did that with a person that lived across the street from me one time. They were playing music at midnight and their speakers were pointed directly at so I just went across, I printed out the city statute on noise. I said, here. He's like, what? You're going to file? I said, I don't have to do anything. It's already done for us. We don't even have to discuss it. Here it is. It says 10 p.m. That's it. I'm just going to show it to you, and then we don't have to talk anymore if you don't want to. So, yeah, when things are spelled out, there's you don't even have to waste time thinking about it. You can just get on with the startup and not the doing what? What happens if this? Is this my, who? And actually, there's one thing. The question of sometimes there'll be an intellectual property component.
Right.
And so when you enter that partnership, the verbal agreement, which from what I've understood from my attorney friends and relatives is worth the paper it's printed on, but still it's there.
Right.
And so I have an example. I have the lemonade recipe and we're starting our lemonade stand. Do I own the recipe or is it now property of our company or our partnership or whatever? And what happens if we part ways? Do I retain ownership? So these are the questions that I think nobody ever thinks about until it becomes hey, that's my idea. That's my recipe, my concept. Right. So I don't know if you can answer that for a general case like this, but is that a point of contention that people should absolutely consider first, or is it just becomes part of the company assets? But is it a company asset at that point?
No. It really is. That's the beauty of contract law. Contracts are as old as men are on the earth, basically, and it's
don't eat this apple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oral contracts are just never a good way to run a business. I mean, I have a client that I'm still trying to drill this into. They're $50 million a year in revenue, and they're still doing handshake deals. It's amazing how people, because it works until it doesn't. So, yeah, I mean, normally if I'm advising somebody, I would draft a intellectual property licensing agreement, and that would be much more formal and complex and state, okay, I'm bringing this, and part of my what I'm contributing to the company, or you call a capital contribution when you're first starting out, is this piece of intellectual property. But I'm giving you a non-exclusive right to use it in this limited capacity or in any capacity. And instead of me contributing money, I'm going to license it and not charge royalty fees or other fees. And if that's spelled out, it's really clear. And if that person leaves, you write in that agreement, all right, when I leave or I'm bought out, this, I usually you'll let them continue to use it in that limited purpose, but they can't license it to other people. They
Right.
can't, it's still you that owns it. It's really like a software license. You just get to use it for the purposes that it was intended for.
Yeah, and this comes up with open source projects. For example, someone asked me for my other thing I'm doing, the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, which is also a 501c3. So I've known the joys of Silverflume a couple times. It's painful, but yeah, the question sometimes is like, so if I put code into this project, do I sign away my rights to it? Like, no, it still came from your head. It's yours. You're just letting us, like you're giving a copy to the project, but you still have it. It's still yours. You can do it. It's a non-exclusive. You can do whatever you want with it at the same time. It's all open source stuff. You can do your own closed source. So I think there is always that like, what am I getting myself into, or what am I giving up, or whatever. So I think the more clear that is, the better in general, whether it's a coffee
Right.
recipe or a lemonade or a software or anything. So yeah, clarity, as is the case, clarity is key. Always the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, when you can put it in writing and have everybody sign off on it before you get going down the track, it's always better, because again, if there's an opportunity to make money, they could be your best friend one day, and the next day somebody, I look at it as a lawyer. I literally look at the worst case scenario, and my clients, I represent that client. I don't, unless there's a conflict waiver, I can't represent multiple parties. And so if someone
Right.
comes to me, even I have to get in writing, hey, okay, the two of you want to do this business, you want to share the cost, you don't want to hire another lawyer. Well, you've got to put in writing that you're waiving potential conflicts, and here's a list of potential conflicts that can arise, and we make sure everybody's on the same page, and we have to get those type of things in writing, from an ethical standpoint. But just from a business standpoint, to your point about the story with your neighbor, it's so much easier to have it documented there, and then nobody's a bad guy or trying to take advantage of the other person. It's just, look at this. This is what was agreed to. We were on the same page. Nothing's changed, and we can move on, focus on making money in our business.
Although in the case of that neighbor, he still got mad at me. And
Well, that's
it's one of
true.
those things. You end
Nobody
up buying
likes the
somebody.
person enforced.
Well, yeah, and I was spoiling his evening with his friend. It was midnightish, but yeah, I mean sometimes, but you gotta regress to the pre-agreed upon terms, because that's why you did that, right? So yeah,
Right.
and I think it's something just like the prenups, or just like any relationship of any kind, business, personal, or otherwise. Yeah, you agreed to this, and now it's different, so we have to figure out how to get back to what we agreed to, and that's something I think people find out the hard way. Everyone has a story, or two or five. Sometimes they're very expensive. So you would suggest perhaps that
Well,
it's
yeah.
worth thinking about ahead of time and getting it in
Yeah,
writing, which you've said several
absolutely.
times.
Well, the other thing is, any form operating agreement worth its salt will also have an attorney's fee provision in it, which is really important. Because in the event, I mean, unfortunately, and I, even as a jaded litigator, I just, I see people spending so much money trying to fight out these issues. But the beauty of having it in writing with an attorney's fee provision means that it's going to be all, you can't necessarily stop somebody from suing, but if they're suing in bad faith, or they're suing and you have a clearly written contract, you're going to, one, be able to cut costs by the litigation, truncating the litigation, and two, recovering costs from them. If you don't have it in writing, there's no, this is a big difference between the United States and other, especially Europe. You don't get to recover your attorney's fees from the other side just because they made you come into litigation, unless you have a contractual provision stating. So that, I mean, if nothing else, that provides you. I mean, that's worth its money.
Yeah, these are. I'm going to guess that anyone who you have talked to who is doing a first time out, hey, I'm starting a business with my friend, roommate, wife, husband, cousin, cellmate from whatever. All of these things are shockers, and then of course there's we've known each other for. But then the second time they'll be like, I would like everything in writing, please. So it's a lesson.
Yes.
Or whatever they've just learned this lesson, because everybody does. Like I said, I think it's like having insurance. It's like having insurance. That was my motorcycle. Sorry, if you heard that. I live near a street, so it's like having insurance, right? You don't need insurance until you need it. So yeah, a lot of these things are. We should do it, even though it's a slog, because later when your house is on fire, like, oh man, I'm glad I got that insurance. I'm glad I had that in writing. All that stuff. So yeah, these are uncommon sense items that the voice of experience will be yelling the entire time. You should be getting attorney's fees accounted for, separable, make it separable, etc. I'm not an attorney. I know what I'm talking about. But what I have there's a thing called the Public Benefit Corporation. Do you know anything about those? Hope so.
Yeah, I mean, they're not super common.
Right.
So I haven't personally worked with them, but you have those B corporations that are. They've really only been around for a few years. They kind of, I think they're kind of controversial in the business world, because you have like the fundamental like Chicago School of Economics mentality is that like the only thing driving a public corporation should be maximizing shareholder value. And
your
these
fiduciary
kind of
responsibilities. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
if you're taking a stand one way or the like on a political topic or moral topic, that you're actually potentially jeopardizing that. And so it's kind of an interesting, nuanced corporation where its sole purpose really is to have it's mission driven, and that can sometimes be at odds with the bottom line. It's kind of a fundamental.
Sure. I only ask because I've known of a couple. It's a very vanishingly small number of people who have formed public benefit corps and don't know the general population thinks about these things, about like, why does YouTube's cut down, take down videos? Well, because they're responsible to their shareholders, and maximizing shareholder value means maximizing advertiser revenue, means all of these things factor into each other. I've formed a nonprofit twice now. Here in Nevada, and that's a different thing entirely, but for the most part, people often confuse nonprofit and charity. You can be a nonprofit and be a lot of other things. Section A has a lot of like 15 or 16 different C things: C3, C4, C5, C. So yeah, it can actually get complicated when you decide to. An LLC is kind of, I will say, easy with a big asterisk by it. But yeah, as you get more interesting, say, do a lot of reading, of talking to Hayden, they can be a good time. A weekend spent reading. And
yeah, and even, I mean, if it's something very specific, like I said, one of the worst things a lawyer can do is pretend like they know everything. I mean, that's one of the reasons I like my firm, is I don't have to. I got a guy that all he does all day is employment litigation. I've got a guy that does I've got people in my office that do the licensing stuff, and and whether that's, a liquor license, gaming license, cannabis compliance. So it's important to know where you can, even professionals, to know what your limitations are. And like I said, I don't do tax, so I have connections. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, is I can be a resource too. If I don't do it, I know somebody that does do it. And
right.
for like nonprofit, I know an accountant who primarily works with nonprofit entities, and so she's going to know a lot more the meat, because really with nonprofits, the taxation is the biggest, most important. Making sure you're in compliance with the IRS is the biggest concern. So yeah, I would say it kind of depends. You don't know what you don't know, and asking the questions will help.
That's the key, is that I'm pretty sure most people think they know that a nonprofit just doesn't make money. Haha. But until you look at what that really means. What does inurement mean? Well, it's an old word. Look it up. But how you benefit externally. We're building the Startup Resource Center. That will probably be a podcast or two when we actually are up and running. But a nonprofit 501c6 in this case, so it'll be kind of a chamber of commerce, more of a business where common interest is entrepreneurial, startup mode. But what happens if we work with somebody that's like a director or an advisor or something, and then they form a thing, and then they've had conflict of interest, access to information that so there's all kinds of things you have to wonder how they're inuring themselves. If these are things that I wouldn't have thought about 2 months ago in this case, but the more you read and the more you talk to people with good advice, it's food for thought, and one should always be eating that food for thought because you don't want to be caught later. As you say, I mean, the IRS will come and knock on your door at some point and take away your nonprofit status,
right,
or your C6 or whatever status. Nonprofit is a state designation, by the way. IRS designation is a 501c. That is something that people don't get either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's in the tax world and the legal world, and really, there are terms of art, we call them, and even if you think the meaning of a word, I mean, cases have gone on for years, coming down to a few words on a contract. I mean, that's just the reality. You just don't know. I think that if there's one message I can convey today, is just becoming educated, having a plan, and putting that in writing are the most important elements.
And not with ChatGPT. No ChatGPT. Don't even think about it. I was going to say there was I don't remember at all the case, but there was a case, I think fairly recently, not last year or anything, but it was an Oxford comma issue, right? Something about
I think that's right.
Things. And it does come down to that old school grammar that you diagramming your sentences comes in handy when it comes down to who's going to win this case. Yeah, I mean it's it's the stuff people don't think about until they think about it. And I was saying before we started recording, there's the advice you get from some people will be, well, this worked for me so far because they maybe didn't encounter the Oxford comma issue, but somebody who knows, so somebody who's familiar with how contracts are written and how the grammar rule, shall, will, what's the difference, etc. Mm-hmm. So if you know causally versus, I've never run into a problem with shall versus will, but you will run into that problem eventually. Somebody will. So if you just go by correlation, personal, not untrained experience is useful to a point. But our adventures in starting this resource center have included contacting the resources that are available now, and some of them are a little sketchy as far as concrete information versus opinion. Well, it's important to differentiate opinion versus actual fact. If I said, hey, Hayden, should I form a C Corp or an S Corp? You said, in my opinion, it should be, well, your opinion is you're an attorney, unless you're telling me it's not legal advice, right? But if I ask somebody on the street and they go, S, sounds good, that's their opinion. Those are two very different opinions, though. And I think people are too easily swayed by what their friends tell them. Like, I've formed an S Corp. Yeah, me too. Right. So you think, then I'll form one too. And it's, you should have done a C Corp. So I'm being sort of facetious here, but the point is that people sometimes take advice from the availability heuristic. They don't do the reading. They don't ask people like you. And then even more, so the state is enough of a pain. You mentioned some licensing stuff that you probably have one there, your firm who specializes in that, but there's the local concerns, especially because City of Las Vegas and unincorporated Clark County and Henderson are different places, different regulations and permit requirements, licensing. Does anybody even know how to keep that straight?
Yes. Her name is Dawn, and she works in my office.
Wonderful. She's awesome. We'll have her on next week.
Yeah, no, she is. We have a wonderful bunch of paralegals that also, like the Secretary of State, for example. She really is great in knowing all the different rules and what's changing and everything and dealing with them. But that's the important thing to understand, just because, you have to look at each license, quote unquote, because the state business license, well, what does it allow you to do? It allows you to pay your annual fees to the state.
That's right.
Secretary
Filing,
of State.
Update
it's
your
really
list.
A money grab, and they put your name. And so it's a money grab from each of those local and state.
Yeah, it actually is. And Silverflume is often inaccurate in their reporting. So I think both of the things that I have, two of the three things that I have in Silverflume are not quite accurate, which is disappointing. but I will never try to fix them because that's their problem. I have the submitted documents if anybody has any questions. But yeah, it's interesting. And the city, same with the city. And it's really literally, as you say, it's an administrative fee so that they can keep track, so that they know exactly where you are. They really are just collecting. And fun fact, if you're an open data fan, the city of Las Vegas maintains a open data set for business, and generally well beyond the administrative boundaries of the city. I want to say, because I just looked at this, because that's how I roll, I want to say there were 116,000 plus, a couple hundred business licenses as of October. So it's not totally current, but that's a lot of business licenses. Are they all active? Who knows? The staffing the staff, I've interviewed all of the staff, both of them from the GIS group, which is a Geographical Information Services group for the city. They get that information from the licensing entity, county, in different cities. So it says up to date as the data they can get and all that. So with all those disclaimers, that's still a lot of business license. So you're really paying money to have someone say, "Yep, we got a record of you." Right? That's real.
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain level of enforcement. Some industries are going to be more heavily scrutinized, or if you're doing a lot of business, and it's compared to maybe the mom and pop shop doing it out of the garage. But yeah, in theory, it keeps things organized and provides a way to enforce the code. That's important.
I mean, it's like having your address on your driver's license. That one of the main reasons is so that we can come and find you. We have to know where you live, and you have to get your voter stuff.
Right.
So they justify. And so yeah, it's something similar, but but it is important. And there, I was not there for this, but I'm told that at a recent small business event with various booths of informational advice and what, someone was heard to say, "Do I need to form a LLC or get a business license?" And did you say or? Did you say or in there somewhere? So there's just a general, and it's not, I mean, it's literally ignorance and uninsulting the term. You just have to do a lot of, and there's just a lot of stuff, and it's written in jargon that people like Hayden like to write in attorney speak or legalese, as they say. And not all of it is, although, I mean, I've certainly read Chapter 82 a couple times because that's also how I roll. But when the
problem is lawyers try to put, they put initial drafts out there, and then the legislature goes and it's combed over and changed by a lot of non-lawyers, and even lawyers, disagreeing and compromising will create confusing language in contracts sometimes. But it's even worse if you have lay people. It's all compromised language, and so it really is probably the most difficult and sometimes unintelligible pieces of the law that we have are what's written in the statute, and so much of the cases are about trying to interpret and figure out what that actually means. And
but to add to it, so when I was in the Bay Area, I was the director of a owners association for food trucks. And by the way, for some reason, they didn't get the stadium worked out here, but they did make mobile vending on the streets a little bit more legal here in Nevada. So that's good. All those strange priorities, but that's good. But in the Bay Area, I lobbied two different city council. I went to city council meetings a lot and changed some rules on zoning. And so yay, congratulations. But I found when I was speaking, I lived in Sunnyvale, so I was talking to the person in Sunnyvale. She was luckily a food truck fan also. She said, the problem, a lot of food truck owners don't read the whole the statute revision chain. Because if you just read the original thing and you don't read the changes that have gone on over the years, then you're not current. So you're reading the wrong version. You see that a lot. Like, do people jump to so the NRS, the Nevada Revised Statute System? You'll see this this changes that, and you have to read everything and see what changed. And it can be a bit of a slog but it can also save you a lot of headache if it can cause you headaches. So now,
absolutely, you can get into a rabbit hole of amendments to. We just have legislative session coming to an end here, and you go back through and try to read all the red lines. It can be pretty confusing, and some statutes even only apply. They have a version that applies for a certain date, and then after the date that the new amendment comes into effect. So, I mean, again, that's a lot of my job is figuring out what the law is, trying to interpret it to the best that we can. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of black and white in the law. or I should say, where litigation usually happens is in the gray areas.
Right, and this we have stare decisis. Is that how you pronounce it? So
Yeah,
after legislation, after a statute is revised, it's published, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And you're like, nope, there was just a court case, and they determined that that part of it's illegal or cannot be enforced that way or whatever. So you really just basically have things that impact you, and it can be a full time job. And if you're trying to start a company, that's not the full time job you want to have.
right.
So what could go wrong though? That's coming to the end of our time and my list of things to talk about. So what could go wrong though? I've read nothing. I understand nothing. I've believed all my friends. I've written nothing down, and we're in business. And Ted steals my lemonade recipe, and he's out. He's formed a new company with Bill, and they're having a movie or something. So in your Bob and Ted, my first thought was,
Yeah,
oh, Bill and Ted.
yeah, yeah. I don't know
So
anyone with Bob and Ted, but I guess I don't
you were
want there to
saying,
be any intellectual property issues, so
I won't.
we're gonna go with Bob and Ted.
Okay, fair play.
Mild,
So
mild lemonade adventure, I guess. I don't know.
there you, well, the Vegas edition.
Yeah,
Bill lost all his money. So there's a myriad of fees and fines if you don't file things. There obviously the IRS. The IRS could lead to, like, is there anything you could do wrong with your filings that would lead to criminal issues, prosecution or otherwise charges in Nevada, like state Secretary of State interactions? Could I do something so egregious that I get hauled off to jail?
it's pretty unlikely from, like the worst thing on a like Secretary of State, for example, if you're not doing your annual filings, I mean, they'll at some point make you, they'll revoke your, I think at
Sure.
first they just put it like on like probation or whatever, and you have to pay all your back fees in order to get it reinstated. Um, Interestingly enough, a company cannot sue if it's not in active status. And so I guess
Ah,
to your point on if Bob and Ted go and Bob's like, I'm out, I'm taking the lemonade recipe, and then you want to sue on your behalf of your company, then you've got to reinstate it and ensure that's in place. So that's just kind of a side note. But as far as criminal, no, I mean, like, it's, you also have to look at like the enforcement. Look, there are people that do civil code enforcement, so that before you get like the criminal stuff is, there's so few resources, they're going to focus on much more egregious stuff. So the main thing you'd be concerned about is code enforcement, and that comes at the county or city level, and that's really more about if you're improperly operating business or doing something that's against the code, then you could get a fine or citation. Eventually, they could like shut down your operation. So, but to get to that point, it's kind of a long road. So you get lots of chances to make things right before you're in that position. But I would just
sure.
say, yeah. I mean, anytime you have a question, you've got to either look at the code or you got to hire somebody that understands and what it says, and it depends on your
Yeah.
situation.
So anything criminal, and I'm not asking for a friend or anything, but the criminal stuff is that'd be like the worst case. Probably if you're committing fraud or if you've cheated the IRS out of their due or anything. We don't have, obviously we
Yeah,
don't have
you're
the
if
same
you're committing
tax.
tax evasion, yeah, like
Yeah,
IRS has a whole range of powers at their
sure.
disposal.
But for the most part, if you get it wrong, if you haven't taken the time to speak with an attorney or maybe consult with the legal zooms and other similar services, cross your fingers and hope for the best. Probably will just cost you money and maybe friends.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
so you're not, so it's not a life or death thing. Which I'm not diminishing the value of doing research and understanding, but it will just be it's another word for tuition. You get to learn life
yeah.
experiences.
No, it's true. You tend to either pay somebody, an attorney, to help you through it, who's learned the law and learned from past litigation and on the unfortunate situation of other clients, or you pay pay for mistakes made. There's usually always a cost, and whether it's an opportunity cost of something because your time was taken doing something else, or the cost of paying somebody that, an attorney that knows the law, you're going to be paying. So it's, you're constantly doing that cost benefit analysis as an entrepreneur. And I can't tell, someone what the right answer is for them without I give advice. These are the risks. These are the, like I said, there's not a lot of black and white. There is, like you said, if you're committing fraud, yeah, that's pretty clear cut. But if you are, I can't tell somebody what the best situations for them in every single situation. I can give my job is to advise, look, here's the pros, cons, and this is what I recommend, but ultimately the client has to decision, and one right answer for one person might not be the right answer for another person, and that's the complexity of running a business. But the hallmark is getting informed, getting information, so you can make that the most informed decision or possible. Is really
Sure. I'll put you on the spot here a tiny bit. Suppose you give advice. I've retained you as an attorney during my startup process. You've given me advice on some things. We've weighed the options. I've taken your advice, and then it turns out, I'm not going to say it was bad advice, but it doesn't go according to the best laid plans. Do I come back and yell at you? Is there a warranty? How do legal advice situations work? Do I keep the receipt
we try to keep
just in
it a
case?
secret, but there. I mean, the worst case scenario is, there's a difference. There's weighing out the risks, benefits. Ultimately comes down to the client's decision. Now, we can't guarantee anything. We can tell you what the state of the law is. But ultimately there is, if something was done that's considered malpractice, there's every attorney is supposed to have malpractice insurance. So just like if you go to the doctor and he cuts off your arm and you were going in for a colonoscopy, yeah, like you're gonna have recourse there. So as with anything, there's liability and there's insurance, and that comes into play. But those are more in the most egregious of circumstances. If it's advice and recommendation, I mean, yeah, look, I try to be reasonable with my clients. I try to be reasonable with the amounts I'm billing, and I think my firm, our rates for the service we provide and the size of the firm we are very reasonable. But I try to be reasonable. If somebody has a question, or they're just starting out and want to, I'll talk to anybody for 10 to 15 minutes and just kind of listen to their situation, try to point them in the right direction, or I can do a more detailed consult. But there's, I guess, no real great answer in that there's no guarantees in the law, just like in business. There's certainly things that if you do could lead to negative consequences or fines or fees. But when you're talking about structure and strategy, there's a lot of gray areas, and it's more of a judgment call. And all I can do as a lawyer is give you the best information and advice that I have based on what the law says and my past experience with clients. And as a business owner, you got to make that decision on how you're going to move forward.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like any, medical advice, it's still up to the patient. Legal advice, client, I guess. If you ask a server at a restaurant, which is better, the menu item A or B, and you go with B, it's your fault. I went, that's not how it works. So that is understandable. I think it's important to know, though, you can either wing it or you can actually ask should I go with A or B on the menu here? And they'll be like, I tasted both and I would go with A, right? At least there's some specific experience. So if you just ask your friends and and actually this is a subtle thing, and it's in the age of AI, we will start to see how this impacts much more substantially. But if the AI that you're using was trained on bad advice, it will give you bad advice.
Right.
So, but people don't think, the internet said this. Well, the internet is full of bad advice, but it's also full of good advice. But if you are trained specifically on bad advice, you'll get bad advice. So if you only ask your friends and they have no idea what they're talking about, they're going to give you bad advice. And I'm not saying don't talk to your friends, but you have to consider the source. And this is something people don't do when they go online and they chat GPT it. So yeah, I think going in knowing, being informed is probably the key, just in general, whether you read everything. And the Secretary of State site, actually the Nevada revised statutes are probably a good reference when you want to really happen. The Silverflume site is good to a point. I'll give it a solid C-. City website for Las Vegas is okay. You can go to City Hall. The people at City Hall are very nice. So if you're starting a company and you want to go talk to people, they're sometimes available and helpful. Or you can talk to people like Hayden. They know it and give you some good advice, which is not really a plug, although I do thank you for your time. But yeah, the value of talking to people who know how things work is substantial and will likely save future costs, expenses, pains.
Absolutely.
So you go to Tech Alley, and I know we're basically out of time. So if you got to bail, that's fine. But I'm just curious at Tech Alley, because I've only talked to you at lunchtime and so on when I go there as well. So do you actually engage in any? I was almost going to say helpful conversations. Surely they're all helpful, but are you sitting down with people and actually listening to anything and giving advice, or is it purely like, this is a casual day, I can help you out? Like, how do you, because the general thing is, if you ask an attorney something, or if you ask a doctor something, like, oh, my neck hurts, and they're like, oh, you should put some ice on it. Is that your medical opinion? Like, no, it's just something that
Right.
people do. So
Yeah.
how do you draw that line if you're in a setting like Tech Alley or other gatherings like that? Are you always an attorney, or are you sometimes just somebody who knows a lot of stuff? If that makes sense.
Well, no, that's a great point, and that's why, we try to be clear, something like this. Even I'm not providing legal advice in general on this podcast, but some people don't understand that, and so we try to be clear, and that's why for every client I have, when I'm giving legal advice, they we make it clear and we have them sign an engagement agreement with us. And if I'm at Tech Alley, I'm there. I'll listen to people's issues. I'll think about it, and I'll say, like, let's plan a time to actually sit down and talk. And where, because I'm not comfortable giving legal advice until I know the facts that I need, and that often requires me to have two-way conversation with them, ask questions, and find out, because the context matters. The facts, we always say you got to apply the facts to the law, and so yeah, I try to make that as clear as possible. But, and when I'm being retained as an attorney, they sign an agreement, and it's more of an official thing. So I try to be clear up front. But it's only so much you can do. If I talk to you at Tech Alley or around town for 15 minutes, I'm not trying to become your lawyer unless you want me to, and we actually have like a real conversation where I can do an intake, and there's a whole set of ethical rules that I have to follow as well, depending on if you're considering engaging me. I take that seriously, and so I don't know if that's a great answer to your question, but we try to make it
No, it is.
clear as clear by what's what I say, and ultimately signing an engagement agreement.
Yeah, just the examples I gave just now, the doctor, the lawyer, and the
Yeah.
waiter all walk into a bar, and they're no, I'm just kidding. So a server at a restaurant, or if you ask about A or B and the server says, I would go with A, and then you later are like in an anaphylactic shock in the emergency room, like, oh, he didn't say that there was onion or peanut, pick your favorite allergen. Well, you didn't ask. You didn't say anything. So you were only asking me A or B, not, by the way, I have these food allergies. Similarly, I could ask you all kinds of questions, and then you find out after the fact that, oh, that person that you're talking about is a client of ours, and that's a conflict. So I can't give you. So there's,
Right.
and medical stuff, obviously. You didn't tell me you were allergic to peanuts. Same problem. So yeah, I think
Well, that's a good point, and something I didn't mention. Sorry, just to jump in, is for everyone that's thinking, even if I'm doing just a brief consult, we run a conflict of interest check through
sure.
our whole system database of names, and so that's something that even if people reach out online or something before I engage with anybody directly, my assistant will run their names through, and we have that cleared. So yeah, there's definitely a process we go through. So that's what I say when I'm talking to someone. I'm serious, and I know that I'm trying to help them, and we're serious about entering into a attorney-client relationship. That's not necessarily the case. I have friends and family members that ask me about legal stuff all the time, and it's I'm happy to to chat and give some thoughts, but I'm not necessarily giving legal advice unless we're
Yeah.
contemplating that attorney-client relationship.
Yeah, my sister is also an attorney in Arizona, so she usually will say, I am not an attorney in Nevada. I don't know the laws in Nevada. I cannot possibly, same when I was living in California, which is understandable. And that's the thing that I think people, the lay person, the casual person with questions, doesn't necessarily consider. The one of the reasons that you want to talk to me or a doctor is that they do have all this process in place. Their expertise is gated by some rules and questions that they know to ask and whatnot. So your friends don't know to ask you if you, are you going to be engaging in a cannabis business? Then you cannot form a business league for cannabis owners. The IRS doesn't allow that. So if you don't ask those questions, you're like, oh yeah, we're forming a business league for cannabis dispensaries. Did you check on the laws for that? No, my friend said it was cool. Right. So you know the questions to ask. If I never said I was starting a cannabis, like the thing at the Startup Resource Center, I know that we cannot work with cannabis companies, cannabis startups as a 501c6, but you actually have to go looking for that information. They don't put it at the top of the document that says, by the way, so I only know that because I did the research a couple of years ago. I assume the laws haven't changed. So that's another thing I would have to check on to see what's current. But yeah, these are just all reasons to do your due diligence. I've used the term do the DD, and nobody uses that term anymore. Have you ever heard that?
I have not. No.
Oh, Silicon Valley. We're going through DD. We're doing the DD. Got to do your DD, and nobody uses that term anymore. But due diligence, you just have to. You are ultimately Hayden's not going to write his name on your articles of incorporation, on your 1023 or 1024 filing, or on your other. It's your name and your partner's names. That's what matters. So hopefully, when the Startup Resource Center is coming together, it's been something I've been talking about for years. So that must be the time. So hopefully, some of the stuff we've talked about today will be directions that we can point people to talk to. And Startup Resource Center, not Startup Answer Center. So,
Right.
So great. Anything? Have I left anything out? There's that mysterious third step and then profit. I guess that's how it works.
Yeah, you just and that's to your point. Things change. The business strategy might change. The law might change, but so it's keeping yourself current and updating your business plan and making sure you're utilizing those resources along the way. And it can be a daunting task to start a business. I certainly, like I said, I respect entrepreneurs, and I've seen some really successful people, and it looks very rewarding. It's just a matter of getting the right information and the support along the way. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about the Resource Center and going to be involved. So
hopefully everybody in Southern Nevada is. We'll be mentioning it. I'm sure we'll mention it at Tech Alley again. We formed a 501c3 nonprofit to sort of steer a couple of projects. The Startup Resource Center will be a 501c3 profit, so we can possibly advocate for startups when regulations, business license discounts, for example, for underrepresented and veterans and so on. There's been talk of it, and nobody's getting up in city council and saying anything. So that's the sort of thing we could do on top of everything else, because a C6 can lobby and engage in political activity, whereas a normal 501c3 absolutely cannot. Mm-hmm. How'd I do? Awesome. How'd I do? So we have big plans, and hopefully people will be learning more good stuff. But I appreciate all of your time today, and I hope you are interested in what we're doing, and that we will talk about it. So I think we can leave it there. Plus, we've gone 12 minutes over our allotted time. Hopefully, we aren't charging in 6-minute intervals. This is 0.2. I know how that works. Standard billing. Oh yeah. Engineers should self-employed people. You should do that too. Don't bill for time. Bill for standard billing. And on that note, I will thank you, Hayden Smith Esquire. You got to add that especially because we made our bill in Ted Ted whatever his name Esquire. But totally messed that up. But thank you for your time and useful information. And your journey begins here. It does not end here. So everything you've heard today should be the beginning of your reading and research and professionals. And that's how you'll succeed, by knowing. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Hayden.
Thanks. Appreciate it.